How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. It has been a very interesting a week, to say the very least, regarding a star receiver for the Ohio State Buckeyes who has played a very minimal games this season, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. It started out with him declaring, according to my doctors, medically, I'm just not going to be ready to play in this game against Georgia. Then we've seen some clap back from guys like Todd McShay saying, oh, scouts have said this guy is ready, he's healthy, he's worried about his draft stock. And then you see Jaxon Smith-Njigba's family bounce back in the same way on Twitter saying, hey, if this guy could play, he would play. And it leaves a lot to question, to say the very least. I don't really think it's a debate when it comes to, was it a selfish decision for him to come out and say this a month ahead of time and say he's not going to? Absolutely. I mean, it's 110%. You don't really, that's clear. But at the same time, you kind of have to be a little bit selfish in college football. These guys aren't getting paid. You have to be looking out for you, yourself, and yourself only in your future and your career, because the last thing you want to do is go into this Georgia game and re-aggravate that hamstring, or maybe do further damage to it to where it's something that lingers and aggravates you throughout your entire career. Not just this game, but that's the thing with hamstring injuries. They're very tricky. I know absolutely nothing about them, so I'm not going to sit here and play doctor and say, hey, Smith-Njigba's healthy, he can play. Because we've seen this, especially guys in the NFL. It's week to week. Some guys come back a week later. Some guys are taken out for 6 to 8 weeks. I think that's where it gets interesting, though, because, 6 to 8 weeks, last he played was October 22nd. I mean, he'd be again in range to play. And I think that's what's got a lot of people up in storm here. It's a hamstring injury. You got a month. A little over about a month. You got a month to determine if you can suit up and play in this football game. And again, I know nothing about hamstring injury. I can't pretend to do it. We know they're tricky injuries. Historically, if you just look at 95% of cases, it's like a month. You don't know a month from now if you're going to be able to play. You just don't. And I think that's what kind of gets people up in arms. But again, we don't know the extent of this Njigba injury. Is there more to it than a hamstring? That's what I start to question. If you're ruling it out this quickly, is there more to it? How bad's the tear in the hamstring or the strain? I don't know. I can't go down that route and say, hey, I know about it. As an Ohio State fan, it stings a lot. But looking out for this guy, it's like, yeah, I definitely want to see Jaxon Smith-Njigba have the best career possibly can in the NFL. He's going to have a great career. And the last thing you want to see him do is come into this game, aggravate something, and it just hurt him more and more. I don't think it hurts his draft stock. We've heard talk about that. You got to think, look at the Bosa, Jamar Chase. There's guys that sit out the entire year. It looks differently from a character and a competitive standpoint, of course. A competitiveness standpoint, you obviously want to have that competitive nature in your players. When a guy rules himself out a month in advance, says, I'm not going to play in the biggest game in college football or for my team or whatever. I mean, obviously that raises some eyebrows. I think scouts, players, again, that's inner workings things. We don't know if that's him as a person, and that's how he's going to be in the NFL. If he just doesn't have that same competitive drive where I'm going to play, or if anytime I have a sore foot, I'm not going to play. You don't know that because it's college football and it's so much under wraps. I'm sure scouts, I'm sure teams, these guys talking to him, know him more as a person. We're not even going to try to judge him from that perspective because we just don't know. We know this guy is a heck of a talent, and he's going to be an absolute stud in the NFL if he can play. And the Ohio State has made it work this season without him. It would be an absolute huge, monstrous boost to this offense if he could play going into the college football playoffs. But you have to, I think personally, you got to respect the fact that this guy's worried about his health, his future. You just have to. Again, you're playing for a championship, but you're not. This is a guy's livelihood in his career going forward. And the last thing you want to see is this guy going to the NFL and 2 games into the season hurts his hamstring, it's lingering him, or it's plaguing him, first 2-3 years. Curtis Samuel, I think. Curtis Samuel's an example, right? I mean, that we're seeing he's played solid now, but he had so many injury problems earlier in his career, I believe. You don't want to see a guy have that happen to him. The one thing, if there's one thing that does bother me, everything else, I respect it. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, he's got to do what's best for him. But, man, be a little bit of a team player here and don't announce this a month in advance. This does not benefit your team in any way, shape, or form to announce it to the public. It benefits Georgia 1,010% because now they have a month-to game plan. They do not have to question one single bit if Jaxon Smith-Njigba is going to play. I mean, there's still the chance that he undeclares as long as he doesn't sign. But they don't have to question out the game plan. It's a completely different game to game plan for if you're Georgia. More things you have to work on. You can't just zero in on stopping Marvin Harrison Jr. if you have to worry about the potential of Jaxon Smith-Njigba playing in this football game. So if there's one thing I would have liked to see is they just kept it under wraps. It is what it is now. The cat's out of the bag. Ohio State's going to have to figure out what they can do to beat Georgia without it. But man, it's still be nice to hold out hope that Jaxon Smith-Njigba can have a change of heart. But again, what is most important for this guy and this young man and this guy with such a bright future is he does have a healthy and prosperous career. So all in all, can't be upset about it. Ohio State's won all but one game this year without him. Or we shouldn't say won all but. They've won every game except for one this year. And they've been doing so without him. And I think they could do it again here in the playoffs. Wishing nothing but the best for Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the future. I love you guys' thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.